Hi guys, MrRoflWaffles here. This is everything you need to know about SAROS. If you find the game a bit overwhelming, or you're just curious and haven't jumped in quite yet, this is the video for you. First, what is this game? Well, it's a third-person shooter bullet hell roguelite. So when you're fighting, there's tons of projectiles to dodge, and death means you lose most of what you had, but you can upgrade your power permanently as well. It's set in the world of Carcosa, which is dangerous and difficult, but I'm here to make sure that it's easy for you to understand. Every cycle started in SAROS may vary very slightly. The world shifts and changes the layout on each run. Nothing drastic, but you'll notice different areas look a little sort of altered from run to run. Each biome comes with different hazards as well. So for example, Blighted Marsh during an eclipse has toxic pools that deal minor damage while standing inside them. Around the world of Carcosa, you'll also find materials, and one of them is Lucenite. It's dropped by enemies in combat and has a very short shelf life, so you must collect it before it disappears. It's also the main currency used for purchasing permanent upgrades in the armor matrix. But before we explain what that is, we quickly need to touch on Primary. Primary is a friendly machine who is accessible after the first couple of runs, and it's through Primary that you get your path to permanent power, and that's where the armor matrix comes in. So what's the armor matrix? Well, it's this game's skill tree, and it's where you spend gathered Lucenite, like I just mentioned, to increase your permanent power and unlock new skills. Some nodes which you can get pretty early include Lucenite Extension, which increases the time that Lucenite spends on the ground before it floats away, Adrenaline, which unlocks bonuses for taking no damage during combat, Proficiency Enhancement, which gives you extra base levels at the start of your run, and in general, you'll be able to get tons of buffs towards your three main attributes, which are Resilience, Command, and Drive. In addition to Lucenite, there's also Halcyon, which is a rare material that you collect in the world, and it unlocks some really good nodes early on, such as Shield Amplifier, which enables the shield to draw power from corrupted projectiles, which honestly is a must-buy ASAP. Second Chance, which does what you'd expect, it gives you a free life token, and Lucenite Saver, which decreases the amount of Lucenite you lose on death. So those are some of the nodes. You get more sections of the armor matrix as you kill Overlord bosses around Carcosa, and each Overlord has their own powerful node that gets unlocked once you beat them. Next, let's talk about Carcosan Modifiers. These are still inside Primary, and they become available after progressing a couple of hours into the game, and they're used to customize the difficulty. There are two types of modifiers: Protections, which lower the difficulty, and Trials, which raise the difficulty. Each modifier has a value attached to it, and will move the dial either left or right, depending on if you're lowering or increasing your difficulty. It's up to you to balance it all correctly, and up to 6 modifiers from each side can be equipped at once. So that means if you want to use that modifier system to make the game a little easier, you can do that. There are obviously limits on how easy you can make it, but if you need it to be even easier, then you should go into the settings menu and turn unlimited protection modifiers on. Now, this will trivialize a lot of the combat difficulty in the game, so only do this if you really need it to be easier for some reason, maybe for accessibility. But yeah, that setting is there should you require it. There's also this thing called the World Dial. Inside the World Dial, your main objective is on the left-hand side, and collectible tracking for each biome is on the right-hand side. You can also hover over any biome to open up a teleporter underneath Primary and head straight there. Next, let's talk gameplay mechanics, starting with proficiency levels. These are gained by engaging in combat and collecting Lucenite, and they grant your weapons increased power because as you level up, drops have higher base stats, and they also start dropping with additional perks, which we'll talk about more a little later. The perks themselves completely change the way your gear works, and so they're as important to pay attention to as anything else in the game, so it's worth getting pretty familiar with that system. Now, outside of perks, there are 3 main attributes for your character stats. They're Resilience, Command, and Drive, like I mentioned before. Resilience increases armor integrity, aka raising your maximum HP. Command increases your max power, and Drive increases the rate at which Lucenite converts into proficiency levels, and also increases the amount of Lucenite dropped. So essentially, it makes you rich. Now, you also have a shield. The shield blocks and absorbs projectiles while it's active. It doesn't use any resources at first, but once it's active for more than a few seconds, it does begin draining your power bar. When the shield is either broken in combat or it's broken by losing power, it then goes on a 5-second cooldown and you have to wait for it to come back. Next, let's talk projectiles. So the main way you're going to take damage in the game is projectiles, and there are types of projectiles. There are blue balls that do physical damage and can be absorbed with the shield for power. There's yellow balls that do physical damage and add corruption to your health bar, and they can be absorbed with the shield only after unlocking an upgrade, but corruption will still accumulate if you block them with the shield, and red balls break through shields instantly and cannot be dashed through. Now, if you just heard me mention corruption and you're like, what the hell's going on here? Don't worry, we're going to come back to that in like a minute, okay? So just bear with me. There's also barriers that function differently to projectiles. So those are the projectile rules for the different colors. We now have red, yellow, and purple barriers. Red barriers are damage barriers, which can be meleeed to open them. And this barrier can either be blocking a door or shielding an enemy typically. Yellow barriers are enhanced, and they block doorways and can protect hostile enemies during combat as well. And these barriers are stronger than red barriers and can only be meleeed once you unlock a permanent upgrade for that later in the game. And finally, purple barriers can be generated by enemies, and they can't be breached by weapons, but they can be passed through by your character. Now, you also might have heard me earlier mention the Eclipse. This is a device that toggles the world into Eclipse mode, and when you're in the Eclipse, it causes enemies to be more aggressive and to fire corrupted projectiles. That killing enemies yields more Lucenite while you're under the Eclipse, so there's kind of a trade-off there that you can make. And the Eclipse won't be deactivated until an Overlord is defeated or you return to the passage. Now, I mentioned corruption, right? I want to get back to that. This is another damage type that appears mostly while you're under the Eclipse. It's going to decrease the max HP you have and can only be cleared by using your power weapons. And corruption also adds other modifiers, which we'll get to when we discuss weapons shortly. So the Eclipse and corruption are very intertwined in a big way. Next on the gameplay mechanics list is the perfect reload. So when you're out of ammo, most weapons have a reload function, as normal, as you'd expect. But when they do, a small bar pops up on the screen and starts a kind of mini game, and pressing the right trigger or the right stick while the dot is in the highlighted section on the reload bar immediately reloads the weapon, which saves you some time and can kind of separate the good players from the great players. And finally, for gameplay mechanics, before we start talking about character stuff, we've got Stagger. Now, if you're anything like me, you might play games where there's a parry mechanic, or maybe like a Bloodborne, you shoot your little gun and things like that, and you're sort of like, meh, I don't need to do that. I don't need to worry about that, right? And you can play this game and play that way, but you can also make use of the Stagger system if you so desire. And the way it works is it causes hostiles to go limp and not attack for a few seconds. And I'm using the word hostiles here because that's what the game says. I feel so awkward saying it though, I'm not gonna lie. Enemies, hostiles, whatever, same difference. Basically, there's a white bar which is separate from the hostiles' HP, and that represents their level of stagger. Stagger will cause hostiles to take extra damage from upgrades in the armor matrix. So there's one called Stagger Burst, for example, and that makes it so staggered enemies take even more damage from melee attacks. But by far, in my experience, the best weapon to stagger hostiles is shotguns. That category of weapons does so much stagger, it's great. And that's a great complement for melee builds as well when you have Stagger Burst unlocked. Also, Blazing Strike is a permanent unlock towards the end of the game that enables you to instantly jump to hostiles with the right bumper, or R1, while hostiles are staggered. So the stagger system is there should you want to build into it. So that's gameplay mechanics. Next up, character mechanics. First of all, we've got Adrenaline. For this, you collect Lucenite and you kill hostiles to increase your Adrenaline level. Each level of Adrenaline gives your character a new bonus, and Adrenaline completely resets when you take any form of damage, even just falling off the map. And there are drops throughout the world that boost your Adrenaline level as well. So you lose your Adrenaline if you take damage, you definitely lose your Adrenaline if you die, right? You actually lose a lot more than just your Adrenaline. So let's talk about death now. Upon death, a high percentage of your Lucenite is lost when you return to the passage. And you'll also lose any artifacts that you collected in that previous run. Now, the amount of Lucenite that you lose can be lowered via upgrades in the armor matrix, but you're still going to lose some Lucenite. And in comparison, you lose no Lucenite if you travel back to the passage via a teleporter, which is typically available after you defeat an Overlord boss. So that's kind of your motivation to survive those boss fights, because you can then just TP and keep your stuff. Now, final point on death, you don't lose your weapons when you die, but they will re-roll to have a new set of perks on them. So you need to bear that in mind. They may be completely different feeling because they have different perks. And they'll also go down in proficiency level as well. So you got to keep that in mind. So that's death. But what about the stuff you keep in those scenarios, right? What about the permanent stuff? Well, I did say most gear is lost on death, but permanent gear will obviously not be lost. You're typically going to get these from defeating an Overlord boss, and the first piece of permanent gear activates the jump network after you beat the first Overlord, and that enables jump pads all over Carcosa, even ones in areas you've already explored before you unlocked the upgrade. The second one you get is the grapple, very cool, and it also works the same way as the jump pads, where you will get access to previously restricted areas in the early game if you go back as well. The third permanent unlock is Overdrive. This is an ultimate ability that charges from engaging in combat, and it's activated by pressing both sticks at once, kind of like an ult. And it'll make it so that projectiles no longer hit you while it's active, and it shoots a huge explosion towards your target. There are several nodes in the armor matrix that buff Overdrive and make it even better. You can do things like get free health drops, for example. The penultimate permanent unlock is Parry. Lots of P's there. It's a mechanic that is mostly used for blocking red projectiles, and the easiest way to activate a parry is to dash into red projectiles while immediately punching with R1. If you successfully parry, you'll negate red damage, and you'll knock the red projectiles into the direction you're facing when you parry them, and that can be used as damage against bosses if you want, or just against general enemies, hostiles, whatever, in the world. Then we have Eclipse Threads. This is the fifth piece of permanent gear. They appear during eclipses only, and they allow you to travel between two set points. And I just realized I lied. That wasn't the last one. There's one more. It's Blazing Strike, and that allows you to break yellow barriers as well. So this is all well and good, but we really need to talk about weapons, because obviously that's a massive part of this game. So you've got two main categories of weapons: main weapons and power weapons. So let's start with the main weapons. For these, each one has a unique alt fire, and it has a regular fire mode. So the crossbow, for example, fires a rows of arrows all at once with the normal attack, but the alt fire shoots tracking projectiles that split and jump between hostiles, which really changes the game. Now, main weapons can also come as a corrupted form of the weapon, and this means that they deal extra damage while under the effects of corruption, as in while you are corrupted, and the damage scales with how much corruption you have. And I'm mentioning this here because I think this only applies to main weapons, but I'm actually not 100% sure. Let me know if you've ever found a corrupted power weapon in the comments, maybe. Now, main weapons can also have additional bonuses. So auto hit is a possibility. It will display these dots on the HUD when the crosshair is close to a hostile, and it means that the bullets will follow those dots to the enemy if the weapon has auto hit enabled. You've also got rewire, and weapons with rewire deal more damage at the expense of you having to be really good at aiming, so it's sort of a precision situation. So that's main weapons, but the other archetype is power weapons, right? So these consume your power to deal extra damage. And there are 4 power weapons in the game at launch, at least that I've seen. Prominence fires an explosion with a very quick activation time, but it takes a large amount of power to use. The Dispiritor fires a bunch of small blue needles that track hostiles and can be activated with basically any amount of power. Nova Lance shoots a charged shot that uses a huge amount of power, and Illumine fires a beam of energy at hostiles. So power weapons, you guessed it, are powerful, and they slightly remove corruption from your HP bar when you use them as well. And remember, corruption means that your max health is reduced, for example, so if you want to be less corrupted, you should fire your power weapon a load to prevent yourself from suffering from some of those negative effects. So those are power weapons. One thing I need to say about all weapons is they come with perks, and they'll drop additional perks the higher your proficiency level is. And perks really do change the way these weapons feel in a big way, so they're really worth paying attention to. Now, if you want some tech, right, from the playtime that I've already got in the game, beating the game already, I've got a separate video, which is a load of tips I wish I knew sooner before I started playing SAROS. And in there, I've got a little perk combination that you can look out for, which I think is really OP. So that video is linked in the description and in the corner of the screen right now. Or just go on my channel and use your brain and type in the word SAROS and you'll find it. Like, it's calm. It's there. You'll find it easily. But yeah, that video has lots of juice. For now, though, we're going to move on real quick because we need to talk about artifacts first. So artifacts are items that disappear after you complete a run, and they give you bonuses to your main attributes, but sometimes they also have other bonuses that change the way your gameplay functions. They drop from any source that I've seen, but most often from containers, and there's a limited amount of artifacts that you can carry, but you can increase that number via the armor matrix. During an eclipse, any artifact that drops is corrupted, and if it's a corrupted artifact, it's going to have an additional negative effect, such as heavy fall, which enables fall damage from small heights. So you need to be wary of what those artifacts might do to kind of drag you down when the eclipse is active. And there's a nice little summary of the artifact corruptions available here in the inventory if you want an overview. Finally, for this section, we've got Acolyte's Wager. We need to mention this. This is a material found around the world that is used for redrawing items. They're going to go away after a run, so you need to use them while you got them, and they only work on main weapons, power weapons, and artifacts. And when you decide to use one, redrawing that item will replace it with a similar item. So for example, if you redraw a power weapon, it will only ever give you a new power weapon. It won't just give you a main weapon. And additionally, they can be used to destroy artifacts from your inventory, which is useful when you've filled up on artifacts. Now, to get all of these cool things, you need to loot. So let's talk about looting a little bit. There are different loot sources in the game. Containers are probably the most common way to find loot. Blue containers are the most common, and they're free to open, and they might drop anything from weapons or artifacts to health to materials. Red containers are rare and still free to open, and these drop the same items as blue containers, but give you two options to choose from, and when one of them is selected, the other piece of loot disappears. And then yellow containers require Carcosan keys, and these will only give you power weapons. Then separate to the containers, we've got locked rooms. So keys aren't only used for the yellow containers, they're also used for locked rooms, and they contain a whole bunch of goodies inside there as well. Next, let's talk about the activities in the game, right? So you've got alpha hostiles. These are extra powerful versions of regular hostiles that you find in the world. You better subscribe to me because I'm an alpha hostile. Yeah, no, can't get away with that. Nightmare strands are other activities. These are challenge rooms that are discoverable during an eclipse via this icon on the map, and they give you pretty generous rewards at the end, including a refresh on your second chance charge if it was previously lost. And they're also pretty good for collecting Lucenite and increasing proficiency levels mid-run, but, and there is a sad but here, the strands will always have a Carcosan modifier active, so make sure you read the warning at the door before heading in, otherwise it might be a bit harder than you're expecting, and that might take you down. Then, you've obviously got boss fights as well. There's a whole number of bosses to fight through the game, and I've beaten the game. So if you're struggling with any particular boss and you want a dedicated guide for it, let me know and I'll link it on the screen right now. I don't want to overshare the bosses in this video because I don't want to spoil people too much, but the boss fights really are cool in this game, so let me know if you need any dedicated guides. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.